Okay, we're live, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's special meeting of the Place Scrutiny Committee on Monday, the 23rd of October 2023. I'm County Councillor Lisa Dimmock and Chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome everyone today to the Place Scrutiny Committee, which we will consider a call-in request, the decision taken by the Cabinet on the 4th of October in relation to meeting Gypsy, Roma and Traveller Pitch Needs land identification. I'd like to explain to members of the public here and watching online, this committee is a scrutiny committee, and as such, it doesn't make any decisions but offers its view to the Cabinet to aid the decision making. I want to emphasise this point to ensure there is no misunderstanding about the role of Scrutiny Committee and the powers of the Scrutiny Committee. I'd also like to remind everyone that the Council has a duty to provide Gypsy, Roma and Traveller families, and the Equality Act 2010 states that people must not be discriminated against because of their race, and that doing so constitutes a hate crime. That this is reportable to the police. I ask that everyone contributing to this meeting is respectful of this, because any behaviour or language used by people today that amounts to either direct or indirect discrimination on the grounds of race will require the person to leave the meeting. I'd especially like to thank the public for attending today and making representation to us via the public open forum. We have extended the time allocated to the forum in order to hear the members of the public. I hope that the majority of the discussion can be held in open part of the meeting today, but it may be necessary for the committee to enter into a closed session. The committee must exclude the press and public under the Local Government Act, Schedule 12. 8, Part 4, if any discussion relates to existing Roma traveller sites or any proposed private sites, or any information relating to a particular individual or family which is likely to reveal the identity of an individual, or information relating to any consultation or negotiations which relate to the financial or business affairs of any particular person. This would require the committee to move into a closed session, and the press and public will be asked to leave. I will now ask Hazel, the Council Scrutiny Manager, to briefly say a few words about the call-in process that will be applied to this meeting. So over to you, Hazel.
Thanks, Chair. Just bear with me. So the procedure that we're going to apply today is the Council's call-in process, and for some of you that may not be familiar with a call-in, I'd just like to explain that process, which is part of our Constitution. The purpose of the meeting that's being called today is to consider the appropriateness of a decision that has already been taken by the Council's executive, a decision that has therefore been called in to be heard by the Place Scrutiny Committee today. So as the Chair's explained, this committee is not able to make a decision upon meeting Gypsy, Roma and Traveller Pitch Needs and Land Identification, which is the report that has been called in, but having followed the Council's call-in procedure, the committee can do one of three things. They can accept the Cabinet member's decision, they can refer the matter back to Cabinet for reconsideration with reasons, or they could refer the matter to full Council for consideration with reasons. The call-in request will follow the Council's call-in procedure, which allows for members who requested the decision be called in to speak first, outlining their reasons for calling in the decision. The Cabinet member will then be invited to respond, following which officers may respond. The Chair will then ask Place Scrutiny Committee members to comment if they wish to do so. There will then be an opportunity for other elected members to ask their questions prior to the committee considering the way forward. Only members of the committee are able to vote on the course of action proposed. So I'll pass back to the Chair now.
Thank you ever so much, Hazel. With regards to introductions, are you all happy to introduce yourself when you speak rather than us all going round? So we've got quite a lot to get through this evening. Apologies for absence. I understand that Councillor Bryn and Councillor Strong are unable to attend, but Councillor Howarth, who is in the chamber, will be replacing Councillor Bryn, and Councillor McConnell will be replacing Councillor Strong. Next, we have declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest? I know that I need to declare an interest because 2 of these sites are in my ward. Anyone else? No? Okay. Public open forum. I'd like to thank the public for attending today and to ask each person that you speak up to 3 minutes so that we can hear off everyone. So would the first person like to come to the lectern?
Chair, we're going to bring forward Rob Ollerton. It's just been pointed out to us that the handout that's been passed around, on the final page, there is reference to badger sets. Apparently, we're not able to disclose that in the public domain because of badger baiting. So please, can we not make reference to that in the discussion? Okay. We'll bring forward Rob first. That on the screen.
Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Rob Ollerton. I've lived in Mega for 16 years and I've got a degree in town and country planning. I want to talk to you today about inconsistent and flawed decision making within the council. The Scrutiny Committee meeting on July the 19th looked at the proposed sites for Gypsy, Roma and traveller communities and justified its recommendation to reject all the proposed sites by saying that the selection process to date had been flawed. However, despite that recommendation, the Cabinet meeting that followed it agreed to reject the sites in Mitchell-Troy, but would retain 2 sites in Mega and Undy, with the recommendation that further work would be carried out on those 2 sites. I asked this Scrutiny Committee to examine what that further work was and why, after this work was done, only Dancing Hill was rejected. It seems that the work done was not very vigorous or consistent, and let me explain. I refer here to paragraph 3.9 of Public Pack Agenda document for Cabinet dated October the 4th in connection with these 2 sites at Undy and Mega. The Dancing Hill site was rejected after this period of further work because of 4 main issues: land contamination, noise issues, access issues, and closeness to a site of importance to nature conservation. Langley Close in Mega has very close similarities to all of the above, and yet it was retained as a possible site. Noise issues, like Dancing Hill, Langley Close has definite noise issues and air pollution issues, just like the Dancing Hill site. It's very close to the M4. Access. Like Dancing Hill, Langley Close has access issues, which are going to be referred to in detail later by another speaker. St Bride's Road is a narrow country lane, which is less than 3.9 metres wide in places, and it would require a footpath to be constructed so that occupants of the site, particularly young children, could get into the village safely. Closeness to a site of importance to nature conservation. Like Dancing Hill, Langley Close is within the Gwent levels and is even nearer to a site of importance to nature conservation. It's only 70 metres away and even closer to an SSSI, Mega Marsh. My point here in using comparisons between Dancing Hill and Langley Close is not to comment on the merits or demerits of either site. That belongs to the consultation process, but it's still my view that both suits are unsuitable. What I'm pointing out here are the flaws in the process that have assessed 2 sites with almost identical issues, one as unsuitable and one as suitable. Okay. Councillor Griffiths.
Mr. Ollerton, you're up to 3 minutes, so if you could try and...
I'll speed through this last bit, yeah. Councillor Griffiths said in the meeting on the 21st of September, and I quote, "I have not commissioned any further investigation of the site in Undy because I do not believe there is a strong enough case for consulting on this site. The uncertainties of a contamination, the difficulties of access have led me to view that it should not be included in the consultation." and yet Langley Close was retained for possible consultation, even though the two sites are very similar. Why reject one and not the other? I put it to this committee that decision was inconsistent, and it's inconsistent decision making. Very briefly, I'll try and get through this quickly. Councillor Griffiths also went on to say the fear is that the council becomes open to a judicial review on any other site which could be considered by a court to be no more suitable than Langley Close, and yet Dancing Hill was rejected, even though Langley Close is no more suitable than it. Is the council opening itself to a judicial review here? Because of these inconsistencies I've pointed out and the unsoundness of the decision-making, I asked this scrutiny committee to recommend that the process of site selection within the county to be looked at again, with a view to going back to review the whole of the 200,000 acres of the county of Monmouthshire, this time in a more robust, thorough and fair way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ollerton. Can the next speaker come up?
Is the microphone on? Yeah.
It is. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. I'm Keith Poultney and I reside in Mager. We're going to cover some of the errors, inconsistencies, omissions and misleading information in the process and RAG assessment pertaining to Langley Close. You've been given a handout 1 which shows Langley Close of the RAG extract. Handout 2 shows the location of Langley Close site to provide context. Note that it's adjacent to the M4, the slip road, the Grade 2 listed building adjacent to residents. It is stated in Appendix 1 that the land is level. This is misleading as there is a gradient across the site. It's misleading to say it's one site. It's dissected by 2 ancient hedgerows. The hedgerows split the site into 3 smaller sites. This reduces the usability of the area considerably. Also, a new on-site access road will reduce this further, so there is little usable land remaining. Langley Close site is described as a county farm site. Therefore, it should have been filtered out earlier at stage 2 in line with other county farm sites. Now, please refer to RAG document 1. The Langley Close site is described as an irregular shape, as are 25 other sites, which were filtered out as unsuitable at stage 2 due to irregularities. The RAG chart proximity to bad neighbours states the whole site is within 150 metres of the M4, with the closest part of the site within 40 metres of the M4. Yet, misleadingly, on the west end of the site, the tree line buffer is only 10 metres from the M4, and the properties are within 48 metres of the M4, not the misleadingly 150 metres. Under heritage designations, the listed building has been stated as within 200 metres. This is misleading. The listed building estate is only 40 metres from the proposed site. Now, please refer to the highways comments, which highlights the significant impact on the safety and capacity of the immediate local network. In particular, St Bride's Close and its junction with the B4245. It is stated the existing access is not suitable, new access is achievable, directly off St Bride's well located, and accessible site. Apart from contradicting itself, with access not suitable, why isn't this red instead of amber? Other sites with similar highway safety issues have been coloured red and removed from the process as unsuitable. Secondly, the highways comments are inconsistent. How can the site be well located when it significantly impacts highway safety and capacity? Handout 3. The junction with the B4245 has a blind bend. St Bride's Road then immediately becomes a single track road which is only 3.2 metres at its narrowest point, with a further series of blind bends on the approach to the site. Alternatively, access from the A48 is via a long, narrow, winding lane with even more blind bends. Please refer to handout number 4. Note the unsuitable existing site access with the location of a new access being constrained by 2 blind bends and the narrow low bridge under the M4. Also note, please, how narrow this single track road is. Handout 5, please. Note that the unsuitable access with the location, sorry if I said that, sorry, handout 5, shows very recent photos of a lorry that became stuck in St Bride's Road on the very approach to this very proposed site. Residents had to guide the lorry to extricate him from this position. Welsh Government policy on designing gypsy and traveller sites, the document says the road should be a minimum of 5.5 metres wide and accommodate vehicles towing caravans, so that clearly cannot meet this requirement. Therefore, the highways comment in this chart is unachievable and incorrect. Thank you for listening. Now over to Aileen.
Good afternoon, my name is Aileen Holland and I'm a resident of Mager and Endy. You require handouts 1, 6 and 7. Welsh Government Designing Gypsy and Traveller Sites May 2015 document states, section 3.21, if a location is considered inappropriate for conventional housing use on the grounds of health and safety, then it should also be considered appropriate for a gypsy and traveller site. A gypsy and traveller site should not be located in an area which will have a detrimental effect on the general health and well-being of the residents. The site proposed forms a buffer between the residential estate at Langley Close and the M4. From my home in Endy, I can see queues almost daily, reaching up to the old toll plaza on the M4, stretching back from the Caldra. Please to refer to handout 6. It can be seen that on the Langley site close, the noise level exceeds 75 decibels on much of the site. Any noise exceeding 70 decibels is considered harmful and disturbing and could result in hearing loss over time. The M4 and Slip Road are raised, and the land is a natural soakaway for noxious air pollution. Plants and trees can absorb some of this pollution, retaining carbon, essential in this climate emergency. Carbon-fueled engine fumes causing damage to lungs, particularly in children, are well documented, yet no air pollution measurements have been completed for this site. Please see handout 6. Levels in Mager at junction 23A for particulate matter 10 are red. That's the highest level. The RAG chart, handout 1, ecology comments, state the site is less than 250 metres from the Grange Road sink and less than 1 kilometre from Gwent levels, SSSI. The site is only 70 metres from the sink and only 700 metres from the SSSI. The ecology comments state the woodland along the M4 is likely to support protected species. I can confirm it does, having walked the site and have experience of the matter. An ancient hedgerow runs through the middle of the proposed site. It's 130 metres long, over 40 years old, and as such is protected under the hedgerow's 1997 regulations. Yet no ecology assessment appears to have been conducted. MCC's LDP Ecological Site Assessments in Monmouthshire 2021 states, to inform the allocation and deliverability of candidate sites through the LDP process, in line with relevant policy and legislation, Monmouthshire County Council requires the submission of baseline ecological information. Ecology assessments have been conducted for other candidate sites. Why not at the Langley Close site? The RAG chart, handout 1, DES 2 allocation states 0.1 hectares of site DES 2 on eastern boundary. But the DES 2 in review comment states likely to delete DES 2 designation is not publicly accessible. Why are you removing what little DES 2 there is on this site when other sites allocated as DES 2 have been removed from the process? Conversely,
can you wrap up, please?
Yeah.
Been 3 minutes and a half.
Conversely, others that do not have a DES 2 allocation are to be reviewed for potential DES 2 designation, for example, Crossenham Park. To conclude, had the same criteria that was applied to other filtered out sites been also applied to Langley Close, it would have been removed earlier in the process. It is wholly unsuitable, and as with the other unsuitable sites, it should be removed forthwith. In order to retain the whole site as open space, this site has been submitted as a candidate site for protection and is now documented in the Candidate Sites for Protection Register. We will pursue this vigorously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aileen.
Good afternoon. My name's Sandy Lloyd. I'm a resident of Undy. It's been publicly acknowledged by Cabinet members that the process has been inadequate. It resulted in 4 of the original 5 sites being declared unsuitable and removed. The only one of those 5 sites still left in the process is Langley Close, despite having the same or more issues than other discounted sites. But there have been no assessments conducted, or apparently will they be conducted, at the candidate site stage to determine if this site is technically feasible and deliverable. Yet at the 26th of July Cabinet meeting, the following statement was made: "We will test any sites against the guidance from Welsh Government, national good practice and the wishes of Gypsy and Traveller people themselves." And in Appendix 3, the site identification process, it says 28th of July, preparations to commission land contamination, air and noise assessments for Mega and Undy sites to continue to assess their potential suitability and inform future consultation. However, at the Cabinet meeting on the 4th of October, Councillor Griffith stated the appraisals would not be conducted until the planning application stage. This is totally against Welsh Government guidance and MonCC's own process. The Welsh Government Development Plans Manual, March 2020, para 3.36 states, an LPA must use the candidate site process to gather suitable evidence from site promoters to robustly demonstrate the sustainability, deliverability and financial viability of sites. Para 3.47 defines a deliverable candidate site as: the site is generally free from physical constraints and cites access, ground conditions, biodiversity, landscape, heritage and pollution as examples. MonCC's RLDP Viability Guidance Note, June 2021 says, in accordance with national policy, site promoters are required to demonstrate the viability and deliverability of sites at the candidate site stage. Yet Langley Close appears to be the only site that hasn't had the appropriate assessments conducted. Is it because if the Gypsy and Traveller sites can be pushed through the candidate site process and into the RLDP, it will be easier to get them approved at the planning application stage? Yet no amount of planning conditions or capital grant funding can overcome the physical constraints of the Langley Close site. Number 1, a new access cannot be designed with the required stopping site distances or visibility splay due to the positioning between 2 blind bends. The extreme noise and air pollution cannot be mitigated by any measures taken to protect a mobile home or trailer. However, If due process isn't followed and the Langley Close site does get as far as the planning application stage, I will be calling it in to Welsh Government. To conclude then, Langley Close is a publicly owned site and you're leaving the council taxpayer wide open to huge compensation claims for negligence due to future health issues. It's contended that the potential damage is a reasonably foreseeable consequence of the council's breach of duty. It's so blatantly obvious to a reasonable person that the Langley Close site has insurmountable constraints and is not technically feasible or deliverable. The council should not be wasting council taxpayers' money going to consultation on this undeliverable site. It must be removed from the process forthwith. Finally, the residents have demonstrated with evidence that the call-in of the decision regarding the flawed process and unsound decision-making is valid, and we urge you to reject the Cabinet decision to go to consultation on these sites. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name's Phil Harry. I live right by the site on the Oak Grove Farm, B4245. I literally only found out about this just over a week ago. I'm shocked and amazed that this could even be considered as a site. It is in complete open countryside and a greenfield site. Why haven't we been officially notified? Usually if planning is requested of any sort, the local people get notified by posters in the local area of potential plans out of courtesy and chance to voice an opinion. Didn't know about the site on the 4th of the meeting on the 4th of October, and I would certainly like to have my chance to speak. I feel being right next to the site, we should have been notified. I tried to get planning for an extension on my property only recently and was refused by Monmouthshire Planning on the grounds of policy H6. For you who don't know what policy H6 is, the proposed development would have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the dwelling and the rural landscape of the LDP. I think a traveller's camp will certainly have an impact on the rural landscape, and this is quoted in your review of the site. I quote, "It is considered from a landscape and GI perspective that a development of the proposed scale will have a significant adverse visual impact on Monmouthshire's valued landscape." The Welsh Development Plan states that agriculture is one of our key products for sustainability as a country. I quote from the Welsh Development Plan, "Our productive land is a vital resource. Agriculture has shaped our landscapes and supported our rural and market towns for generations. We must continue to value and protect our agricultural land and ensure it can feed and support us. This area of land is graded as Grade 2, very high quality for agriculture. The Welsh Development Plan wants to redeem good agricultural land. So why has this area been made as a choice when the Welsh Development Plan states this? Monmouthshire is a big area. There must be other places you could make as suitable sites, rather than trying to use open countryside and very good agricultural land. If you go ahead with these plans, we would have 3 camps within 1 mile of each other. There is no balance with the whole of Monmouthshire. There's loads of sites that it could be used. Usk Showground could be used. I'm sure a small corner of this is only used once a year. There is land at the back of County Hall in Usk, not agricultural. An old highway site at Howick near Chepstow, already screened by trees. Just some suggestions. About 12 months ago, 200 yards up the road from our house, by the Indian Empire, a sign was erected by Monmouthshire Council. It says, "Welcome to the Gwent Levels." the Welsh Development Plan states the Gwent Levels is classed as a site of special scientific interest. So why are we trying to place a traveller site in this area in plain view? This is the gateway for Caldicot and Port Skewett. No amount of screening in an open field would hide this. Again, we go back to policy H6, the proposed development would have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the rural landscape. Your review of this site states good walking links are made out to the site and off-road provision is given to walkers and wheelers. I've walked this site once in 6 years and won't walk it again. The road is a 60-mile-an-hour road with no footpaths, no lighting. How can this be good walking links? It's a mile to Caldicot before the next footpath and a mile in the other way for the nearest bus stop. The cost to put all this in just seems ridiculous. Have they reviewed costs? I'm not sure. It's a busy road and we can't just walk on that. Children would get run over. Are you able to compensate that? People's feelings? It isn't easy to get out onto this road. Where I live is just getting out of my own drive. Cars going down there more than 60 mile an hour, speeding. It's just impossible. There's no bus service on this road at all, and no services to this site. And finally, I would just like to add, I put my house up for sale, and I've had 2 viewings cancelled already because of possible traveller site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harry. Hazel, are there any more speakers?
Yes, Chair, there's a gentleman that would like to come down and address the committee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Steve Rich and I've live at 7 Farm Barn next door to Phil, the previous speaker, and we moved to the area 15 years ago purely for the attraction of the rural element, living in the country, and so far have thoroughly enjoyed that. Like Phil, we've also been given very short notice, so I'm unprepared with facts and figures around the legalities. So really just speak for, as I've found out at the last minute, I would just like to air my concerns over Oak Grove Farm. And my concerns revolve around the choosing of a greenfield site, when there appears to be lots of sites within Monmouthshire County, some of them brownfield, yet we've seemed to have picked a greenfield site purely to put a traveller's rest. I think in conjunction with that, it's also the cost of creating the services, building the services to service a greenfield site or a traveller's rest on the back of choosing that area. And clearly there may be grants available for this. However, like everybody else, I'm a taxpayer and it's our money that goes towards this. So the cost of utilities, gas, water, electric, sewage, etc., as taxpayers, we all pay for this, what would be deemed to be a huge cost of converting a green field. Like Phil as well, the connection to support services. We talk about schools, chemists, supermarkets. This is a site on a main road with no footpaths and poor connection to all of those facilities. Yet we intend to put families with small children or children into this site, hopefully using these facilities. I personally think it's a very dangerous place to site it. And likewise, it is on a busy main road. Like Phil, I queue up to get out of my drive in the morning. You then queue up to get somewhere near Chepstow. You queue the other direction. It's a fast road, it's busy, and it's dangerous. And while we've been in there for 15 years, I lose count of the number of accidents that have actually taken place along this pure stretch of road. And there are a number of fatalities as a result of the traffic travelling along there. So a poor network, poor communication, poor connection to facilities, cost, etc. So I would ask the committee to review their decision and the selection process for the Oak Grove Farm. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending.
Chair, we have one more. They're just making their way down.
I apologise.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. My name is Matthew Pottinger. I live opposite the proposed Oak Grove site, and I'd simply like to add to the comments already raised by my fellow neighbours. We already have significant difficulties in pulling onto the B4245 from our property due to the speed at which people travel on this road through our section. In the 3 years that we have resided there, we've already had multiple near-miss accidents on this stretch of road. I do not understand how this can be seen as a site with suitable access when residents of a single property are already struggling to gain access to this road. As a resident of the area, I also confirm that in no way would I feel safe to walk along the B4245 at any of the time of the day, but especially at night. There is currently no pavement nor adequate street lighting. One requirement for this site to be suitable is suitable access to local amenities, yet this site does not have this without extensive development. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending and speaking under the forum. Your contributions have helped the committee in this scrutiny, so we are grateful for your time. You're welcome to stay and observe the meeting from the public gallery. We will now move into the formal call-in. Can I ask members who requested the call-in to briefly outline their reasons for calling in the decision? Councillor Taylor, Councillor Howarth and Councillor Jones.
Do you want me to go first? Sorry, Councillor Dimmock.
Yes, please, Councillor Taylor.
Okay, just 1 second. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I felt that there was no real option but to call this in to consider, for the Place Scrutiny Committee to consider the matters that I think actually certainly the residents locally have spoken very eloquently about their concerns around the process. And then secondly, the matter of, I'll come to in a second, but essentially the costs of not conducting the assessments. So if I may just turn to a couple of key points. So colleagues, I'm not here to tell you that the process has been flawed due to inaccuracies, inconsistencies and erroneous information. You've just heard residents set out what they are, what the key points are. But I suppose if I had to summarise that, I would say that my first point is if the process was robust, accurate and objective, why have 4 of the 5 original sites already been ruled out? I put it to you that despite the new Cabinet members' best intentions, the original process is irrevocably flawed. The residents that you've heard from very clearly demonstrated the inaccuracies, inconsistencies and erroneous information relating to Langley Close. I won't go over that again because you've clearly heard it, but just to pull out 2 very, very simple examples. You heard the comments around the proximity of the site from to the M4, and originally I think that was shown as 150 metres, but as was pointed out, actually some of the site is actually about 40 metres from the M4, and again you've seen in the photos that it's not just the proximity to the M4, but it's actually the proximity to the M4 and the slip roads, and also the fact that at that particular point the M4 is over the land. So in respect of some of those key issues, they are really significant. Additionally, you heard around how the highway comments are exceptionally inconsistent. So whilst it talks about the site being well located, it also talks about how this would significantly impact highway safety and capacity. You heard how most of St Bride's Road, for most of its length, is actually a single track road, which at its narrowest point is probably only about 3.2, 3.3 metres wide. At the last Cabinet meeting, the Cabinet member further ruled out the Dancing Hill site. In my view, again, this is further evidence that the process has been flawed from the outset. If we go all the way back to the pre-decision scrutiny on the 19th of July, that clearly suggested that none of the sites were fit for purpose. However, if I take you to the Cabinet report of the 4th of October, it indeed does read that the site identification process has been reviewed by officers to ensure comments and RAG ratings are robust and consistent. Given a combination of the known historic land contamination, possibly noise issues, access issues and location immediately adjacent to a site of importance for nature conservation, or SINC, officers recommend that Dancing Hill West is removed from the process as alternatives are available. So if we delete the word Dancing Hill and insert Langley Close and substitute the word known with potential historic land contamination, we further recognise that Langley Close has all the same issues and really significant constraints in respect of air quality, noise pollution and land contamination. In respect of the costs, as mentioned, the Cabinet member acknowledged, if you like, the shortfall in the process by confirming that officers needed to further review the RAG ratings and site-specific information. At each decision point, further sites have been removed. And critically, there have been no assessments conducted, or apparently are they likely to be conducted at the candidate stage. We were advised repeatedly that once sites were selected for consultation, and this is set out in a number of public documents, that they would be subject to appropriate testing. Indeed, I had a meeting in early August with officers and the then Cabinet member, and were advised that a number of assessments would be conducted and commissioned at the earliest opportunity. At that point, the key concern was the lead-in times for the assessments and matters of duration and cost. For example, the most basic land contamination desktop study would cost around £3,000 for each site. And as Sandy Lloyd pointed out, there was a commitment to test any sites against the guidance from Welsh Government and good practice, and also to commission these reports. I have to say, I was really alarmed to hear the Cabinet member on the 4th of October advise that no testing would be commissioned until we came to the planning application point. Indeed, at the meeting I attended with officers and the then Cabinet member, officers were at pains to explain to me how the local development plan process has changed. So in the previous process, those assessments weren't necessary and indeed led probably to a number of sites being brought forward perhaps that were difficult to deliver and had constraints. So that was not going to be the case. So I would like to very much understand what's changed from in those few months, because again, we heard that officers were going to do further work. We heard that officers were going to commission testing, and it's a real concern that that hasn't been done. I think it leaves the council potentially open to significant cost, because we don't know. We don't know if those sites are suitable because that testing hasn't been commissioned. And I don't think that that's a responsible position for the council to take, in particular at a time when we are facing significant in-year and next financial year cost pressures that are only going to grow. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I am on mute. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Howarth, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon or good evening, everyone. And thank you for the members of the public who actually travelled here today to put forward their paperwork and their statements to us as a committee and to fellow councillors also. I, like Councillor Taylor, are very forgiving sometimes, but on this one I cannot be forgiven for the inconsistencies that we're seeing now with decisions being brought forward. I think the members of the public have made that very clear, Chairman, that we needed to actually have a robust system in place for this, and that hasn't happened. Thank goodness we have called this in, and I think that's very important that we do air where we are with the issues that have arisen with the statements being made. The assessments are very poor, I've got to say. With the RAG chart, I think if that was legally challenged, I think we wouldn't have a leg to stand on, to be honest with you. I think the inconsistencies that we're hearing as well seems to be a pattern as well, and it does amaze me that we actually continue with that pattern, and I feel that we as a council need to listen and do things a lot thorougher than what we are doing. So that was one reason why I've called it in. The funding side for all this, I think, is so important for us as a council that we explore exactly what sites we're going to have in this LDP and making sure that we cover them before we actually include them into the LDP, because they will be challenged also, and I think that's so important in the photography that we are challenged with now in the whole of Wales, making sure that we tick the boxes, we cross the T's and we dot the I's, because like we've found out today, members of the public, when they want to bring things forward and do their homework, they are far, far cleverer than what we are taking them for. And I'm sorry, but I do appreciate everything they've done. This is the second time they've come here from Mager and Undy to discuss their sites. They feel passionate about it, and I feel, Chairman, that we shouldn't be asking them to come again, but hopefully the challenge will be that on Thursday, if it does go to full council, that the council will then see a thorough and proper estimate done of these sites, and making sure that that is calculated and done properly as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to everybody else. And we've heard a lot of facts and opinions this afternoon, and they've all been presented with a great deal of passion and understanding. I've been involved with seminars, as have other councillors, since September 2022. There have been a large number of meetings, reallocating sites and so on, and it's become already a very drawn-out process. Somewhere it's even been mentioned that a decision can be taken during the planning process. What concerns me about all of this is that it adds to the cost, and you don't need me to remind you that we are in a situation where we are in a time of financial stress in any case. It's time to move forward. I'm not going to repeat what's already been said by my fellow councillors. It's time to move forward, as I say. These sites have been assessed, and it's probably now time to refuse this particular one. Let's move forward with the rest of the process and choose sites that are appropriate for purpose. Thank you.
Chair, you're on mute. You would think I know by now. I'm just mindful the dogs are here and they are chatty. I will now request the Cabinet Member, Councillor Paul Griffiths, to respond.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks very much, committee members, and in particular to those members of the public who've addressed the committee today. I've listened very closely, and as always, I learn from every engagement on this and any such process. The committee is being convened to call in the decision that a cabinet has made. That decision was not to approve any of these sites, that decision was to commence a public consultation, a consultation which would take over 6 weeks, would take place in the various locations of these sites, would be organised by an independent organisation, and would provide every opportunity, not just for the people here, but for all the residents of these communities to feed in their responses to this proposal. I think it is right that we take that decision forward, we let those people have their say in full, and we commence the public consultation. As I say, we've not approved any site. All the issues which you've heard of today can be fully represented and fully catalogued and played back to Cabinet and to Council as a result of that consultation. This Scrutiny Committee has considered this issue on occasions before. It did ask that the Cabinet recommence its consideration of these sites. It asked for a reappraisal of the 5 sites formally put forward. And that reappraisal has systematically taken place. As a result of that reappraisal, 4 sites are not being put forward for public consultation. The 5th, the Langley Close one, has been recommended to go to consultation. That does not mean that we've not listened to the Scrutiny Committee. That means we went back to the drawing board as requested. In the view of the Cabinet, Langley Close, not an approved site, but considered to be sufficiently, if you like, above the bar that it should be put to public consultation. What we also did in that reappraisal, requested by the Scrutiny Committee, is to bring forward for consideration sites which had previously been excluded because they'd been reserved for residential development. We took the view that we had now sufficient certainty about the proposals for residential development as set out in the preferred strategy for the replacement local development plan, that it was possible for various of those residential sites to coexist with a small area of land for pitches for gypsy and traveller people. And it's for that reason that we brought forward for public consultation the sites at Bradbury Farm and Old Grove Farm. They previously hadn't been considered because they were included in the strategic site for residential development. That was the case in the preferred strategy in 2022. That indeed was the case in the preferred strategy of 2019. So it has long been proposed and understood that these sites were being considered for development and not fully for continued agricultural use. The point has been made, and I accept that I am in part at fault, perhaps in the way which I presented this in the Cabinet meeting, that these sites have not been fully appraised and appraisals are necessary at a variety of stages. The point I made in Cabinet was that the detailed consideration of any site for development takes place and will continue to take place at the point of a planning application. In the case of a site which we're now considering for gypsy and traveller accommodation, that is not likely to take place for several years. The sites will be considered for public consultation in the next few months. They may be included in the deposit plan for the replacement local development plan in the spring of next year, subject to further consultation. They would then be subject to scrutiny by Welsh Government, and then they'd come back to this council. It is only then, and after then, that an application could take place with all the detailed design for any such pitch. It is then that those of you, and as many of you have who've been on the planning committee, will see the detailed work on design and access, on environmental impact, on the impact on drainage, on the impact on highways. All of those details will be brought forward and considered at that stage. But I may have given the impression that no level of scrutiny was necessary at this stage. That if I did give that impression, I misled, and I'll try and correct it now. There is a need for a baseline assessment before any of these sites are included in the local development plan. A baseline assessment, a high-level assessment at this stage. Relatively new requirement by Welsh Government to try and prevent across Wales sites finding their way into development plans which had no potential for development. So do a high-level appraisal to make sure that you've checked that it's not included, but incapable of further development. So that high-level assessment has already taken place on the Bradbury Farms site, on the Old Grove Farm site, because it's included in the strategic site of the local development plan. Should we go to public consultation on the Langley Close site, we will need to do specific work on air and noise pollution, and we'll need to do specific work on the potential contamination for the site. That will take place alongside the public consultation. Some desktop work has been done, and on that desktop work, it is considered that these sites will be suitable, but we'll do further work during the public consultation, and that will be presented to Cabinet and Council when the results of that consultation are brought forward. The site, and I need to stress this, the site at Langley Close is over 5 acres. Only half an acre will be necessary for the pitches for gypsy and traveller accommodation. Only 10%. It will coexist with the continuation of farming. It will coexist with other amenities associated with this site. The actual impact of noise and air pollution from the motorway will very much depend on where within the 5 acres the actual pitches are located. It's possible to imagine that the pitches are right alongside the motorway. It's possible to look over the whole site and locate it somewhere else. That is the level of detail which will need to follow. My last point is to note that why was Andy excluded and Langley Close continues to be considered. The Andy site was a 3-acre site rather than a 5-acre site. It was going to be far more difficult to avoid the levels of pollution and the potential contamination on that site. The Langley Close site, a significantly larger site. I think it passes that bar to move to public consultation when we can do more work on where the actual contamination would be on that site. We need to move on. this has been considered now for an extended period of time, as it should be. These are important issues which affect communities in significant ways. We need to move on to a thorough and comprehensive public consultation. That's what Cabinet decided, and I suggest to Scrutiny that it should support that process of public consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I understand Councillor Taylor would like to just quickly come back in there. So, Councillor Taylor, would you just like to ask your question to Councillor Griffiths?
Thank you very much, Councillor Dimmock. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, for your consideration of those matters. I think it would be really helpful. I haven't got it in front of me, but I seem to recall the Cabinet papers actually talking to the fact that there would be no assessments commissioned. I will try and find the extract, but you will recall that I did ask you immediately after the Cabinet meeting, because I was concerned, obviously, that that would be out of kilter with the wider RLDP process, and that because there have been air pollution, noise pollution and potential land contamination identified on that site, that at the very least those matters, again, my understanding, would absolutely need to be considered. I'm going to try and find the extract if I can, Councillor Griffiths, but you've suggested that they will be carried out. Do you mean you said at the same time as the public consultation? Thank you, Chair, for allowing the question.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Griffiths, do you want to just come back in there?
Thanks, Chair. I looked very closely at the reasons given for the call-in, and I've spent over the last few days extensive periods of time with the officers who I work with, and the conclusion that I want to put to the committee today is that further high-level assessment will be undertaken alongside the public consultation, and the results of that will be available to Council and Cabinet when it considers the results of that public consultation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Sorry, Councillor Howarth.
Could I just ask a quick question, Chairman, on that basis then? Does that mean then the decision log from the Cabinet meeting isn't accurate, or is there an amendment to that with the statement you've just made? And what day was that Cabinet meeting there for the decision log?
I'm not in a position to quote the precise details of a decision log following any Cabinet meeting. I don't know if my colleagues around me can.
The reason, Chair, I say that is because if Councillor Griffiths has moved the goalposts now from the decision log, I believe that actually part of the call-in was because of that, exactly what Councillor Taylor said. I will as well say that the statement made about the Scrutiny People's Committee recommendations to the Cabinet is inaccurate from the statement made, because I think the statement or the paperwork that the People's Scrutiny Committee recommended to Cabinet was total all 5 sites to be removed and the process start again. And Councillor Griffiths said that wasn't the case. I'm sorry, but misleading information being given to us today, we need to clarify that before we actually even go further, because if Councillor Griffiths has told this committee and the Council that we have changed the Cabinet decision, we are going to go into dialogue on the sites prior to it being included in the LDP, I think that is a total difference to what the decision log was. But I may be corrected. Councillor Taylor may know that because she attended that with your leader. Thank you.
Okay. Officers, do you want to come in there? And I just draw to members' attention in the chat what Councillor Taylor has just put in. She's just added the snip.
Sorry, Chair, with your permission, that's the extract from the Cabinet report.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I'll read it out just for members of the public and anyone online. Although not relating to this report nor any decision to consult on council-owned land for potential future pitch provision development, there will be a capital and revenue cost implication relating to any possible future decisions to develop pitch provision. As yet, the council has not sought to identify and estimate site development costs until such time a decision has been made by the council that a site is considered suitable, which will be made after the consultation. Costs will be determined at the stage of designing a site. These costs will need to be appraised and evaluated. Right there, it's just moved. Evaluated as part of the decision-making process, such as will vary depending on the land identified and other variables such as size and number of pitches. The council will engage with Welsh Government in respect of possible capital grant availability. This is the extract from the Cabinet. Surely testing land contamination costs would be part of this site development costs.
Chair, that's a verbatim report from the Cabinet report, and insofar as that report was accepted by Cabinet, that lays out the financial implications of the decision that it took. So nothing has changed from that. The decision log that was referred to by Councillor Howarth, I think what I've said today and where we've gone forward is entirely consistent. That log was to remove from further consideration Manson Heights, Garrow Road, Rockley and Mitchell Troy, to remove Dancing Hill West in Mega. That decision was to bring forward 2 sites of up to 6 pitches, each at the Caldicot East strategic site identified within the replacement local development plan. The decision was to commence a public consultation exercise on the following council-owned sites for the potential provision of up to 6 Gypsy, Roma and Traveller pitches on each Bradbury Farm Crick, Oak Grove Crick and learn how to scroll down someone else's laptop. Langley Close Mega. There is nothing, I think, that has been said today which suggests that we do anything other than implement the decisions made at that Cabinet meeting. I don't think that's been contradicted or revised in any way.
Chairman, would that include these, for you, Chairman, sorry to interrupt there, would that include the contamination surveys to be carried out prior? Because you're talking quite a cost to that, aren't you? And if you're going to play around with the sites in the Mega one where you said, oh well, because of it's the nearest, it means actually that's extensive. So you're probably talking around about £25,000 per contamination survey on that side alone. Surely that needs to be costed out before we even go further forward with anything we do with these sites. And I think that's one reason for the call-in as well. The financial side of all this was one of the concerns many councillors have, and that wasn't highlighted within the Cabinet document there of taking this forward. Thank you.
Do you mind, Councillor Howarth, if we go to officers to come back to us and then we'll move into the members' questioning and these points can be raised then from there?
No problem.
Thank you. So officers, this is your opportunity to come in if you wish, or would you rather I go straight to members' questions?
Chair, I'm happy coming in briefly, and I believe colleague Nick Keys is online and would like to comment as well. I'm Mark Hands, Head of Service for Placemaking, Regeneration, Highways and Flooding. Just a couple of points in terms of some of the bits that have been said. It's worth me mentioning at the outset, these sites aren't candidate sites. That's a separate process for the LDP. We did a call for Gypsy, Roma and Traveller candidate sites back in 2018, and nothing was submitted. So this is an exercise to find a way of meeting our housing need and inserting those sites into the LDP at the next stage. And as Councillor Griffiths has mentioned, this is just seeking agreement to go out to consultation on the 3 sites in the report. In terms of the studies and the report that's been mentioned, the section that's been quoted is in the finance section of the report, and so in all of our reports we bring forwards, we have to set out to Council what the financial implications of anything are, what the revenue costs are, capital costs as known, or what will be coming in the future. So that's the context of that quote, and that's talking about the wider site development. There's likely to be Welsh Government grant for site development. They don't cover land purchase, and they don't cover kind of lost value of MCC land, if you like. So if we decided a bit of land was worth residential value, we don't get compensated for that. But grant is there for site delivery. As I think as Councillor Hughes-Jones mentioned, or one of the speakers, that is still public funds, so we're still mindful of how that's spent. In terms of the studies, the way that we'd approach it, and Nick will come in a mo, is those studies that are needed to assess whether or not sites are non-starters would be brought forward if we go out to public consultation on the sites, and that'll be done where needed. And that was confirmed to Councillor Taylor in an email of the 22nd of September. So if I just read an extract of that, we're saying the Council has not commissioned work on the Dancing Hill and Langley Close sites, and will not do so until the final shortlist of sites has been determined. The costs for such studies will therefore not be known until they're commissioned. And then talks about lead-in times. It says land contamination work will be commissioned, if applicable, when Cabinet has decided which site should be taken forward for public consultation. So the intention is that those sites would have studies commenced if the decision's made to go out to public consultation, and that's the stage that we're still at. You would do those studies in stages, and that will inform you what some of the future subsequent costs are. So generally speaking, things like contamination, there's a solution. It very much depends on how widespread the contamination is, if indeed there is any there, because we don't know that for definite yet. And that determines what extra studies are needed and what remediation measures are needed. So it might come to a point where it's found there's no contamination at all. It might come to a point where we find it's really serious contamination and it just wouldn't be cost effective to proceed any further, and we'd advise you accordingly when we get to that stage. Nick, I believe, wanted to come in as well, so I'll be quiet now and let Nick come in, Chair, if that's okay with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, just a very brief introduction. Nick Keys, I'm the Acting Head of Landlord Services at Monmouthshire Council. Just very quickly to just kind of frame some of the costs. So as Mark has said, what we're talking about at the moment is kind of baseline or high-level cost assessment. We've secured some quotations for a noise, air and land contamination survey, which equates to around about £14,000 per site. What I would caveat, exactly as Mark has just framed, is that's not consistent across the 3 sites, and that's because it's subject to the findings themselves, whether a particular site is more prone to land contamination, for example, than another. It also isn't the final cost, so clearly subject to the findings of that survey, there may well be further works that need to be undertaken. But I suppose to just be clear on the level of cost that we'd be looking to incur at this stage, it's £14,000 is the cost of undertaking those 3 surveys. Clearly, we've not progressed with that on the basis of this call-in and the review of the decision. Subject to that decision then, and in parallel with the consultation, we'd look to progress with the actual survey work. So yeah, those are the costs for the initial baseline assessments.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open it up to members. So if you can use the hand up facility in the chat bar. So first I've got Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm not going to duplicate all the points raised, but I do have some specific questions. I would like to ask the Cabinet member 4 questions. I'll go through them all now, and then either he or officers can come in on them. I'd like to know why 2 more sites were added so close to 2 existing sites. surely that's heading towards overkill. Why, for those two sites, were they put forward as the MOD want possibly 300 houses? I know they've said 100, but I know of circumstances under which it could be 3 that would require the probability of 1,000 to 1,300 houses being placed on the east of Caldicot, not the figure which is in the replacement local development plan. Why are applicants, I should say, for other projects being asked to consider Gypsy and Traveller sites instead of the project they're putting forward, even though they're in close proximity to existing sites? And why is the Langley Close site so close to existing homes? We've heard all sorts of reasons other than that, but I haven't had a specific answer to that question. Why are they so close to existing homes? Because my understanding is that the Gypsy and Traveller community don't like to be so close to the settled community, and that particular site would put them right next to the settled community. And one last point, it's Oak Grove Farm, not Old Grove Farm, and I'm not absolutely certain that it is on Oak Grove Farm anyway. It's debatable as to just exactly where that is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Officers, Cabinet Member, who would like to answer Councillor Murphy's questions?
Chair, I'll try first, and
okay.
If officers want to amplify, I'll hand over. The two sites at Oak Grove Farm, thanks you, Councillor Murphy, I'll get that right in future, and Bradbury Farm are close to an existing site. I accept that. I'm suggesting, and the public consultation will give a reaction to that, that they are sufficiently far apart, sufficiently limited in impact, that at least, which we say 2, it could be 2, it might only be 1, would coexist with the existing site in an acceptable manner. Councillor Murphy, I think we should all take care with public concerns and expectations. The preferred strategy for the RLDP refers to, on the one that went out to public consultation, to around 800 homes to be developed on that site. When you refer to a number in excess of that, you are referring to the possibility that the MOD will require a number of homes in the area as and when the redevelopment of the Caerwent MOD facility changes. We'll be discussing the RLDP in Council at the end of this week, and the proposals I'll be making there is that we should not simply be adding the one figure to the other to get to 1,100 or 1,300. We will be controlling that level of growth on Caldicot East so it doesn't get to those figures. I prefer to spell that out in detail in the Council debate later this week. The Langley Close site, part of that site is close to existing homes. Those existing homes have their own access to the site, and the 6 potential pitches on Langley Close would share that access. How close they are to those existing homes, how close they are to the motorway, will be dependent on where within the 5 acres the half-acre necessary for the pitches is actually located. So one shouldn't assume, I don't think there's any reason to assume, that it will be adjacent to or alongside existing homes. So I think I've answered your questions, Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Maria Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Maria Stevens from 7 Ward in Caldicot, and I've got 2 very quick questions. Could officers please tell me, or the Cabinet member, what is the procedure serving for notice to farm tenants? Is there a process of a compulsory purchase? And what happens if there is a resistance to that? And my second question is, due to the short notice, were officers and Cabinet members able to visit all the sites? Thank you.
To visit?
Visit all the sites. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Suggest, Chair, that Officer Nick Keys picks up in particular the question about the procedures for the tenancies relating to these sites.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Griffiths, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. I'll try not to make it too long-winded in my answer, and the only reason I say that is because the nature of the 3 occupants here, or different tenancies, they are very different and therefore subject to different notice periods. So in effect, without going into agricultural law, some of these are far more detailed in terms of the level of notice that's required and planning consent being a condition of that. Some of the other agreements, and I've used Langley Close as an example, this is a grazing licence that is far more flexible in terms of the terms. Compulsory purchase is not required in any of the 3 examples here, so it is simply a case of notice being served at the appropriate time and with the appropriate notice. And what I would stress is that despite that being perhaps the legal requirements, clearly we would look to engage with tenants at the earliest opportunity as and when it became perhaps apparent that that was going to be in the plan for this permitted use. So one of the sites, if I use an example, is on a relatively short-term agreement. It's highly likely that agreement actually will have expired and possibly changed by the time one of these sites were allocated, if in fact that they are. But as I say, clearly, as part of my role on behalf of landlord services, as landlord, if you like, would be engaging with these tenants to make sure they're notified. It may well be that compensation is required, but again, that's in the detail in terms of as and when and if these sites are allocated and the precise agreement specific to that individual tenant. So no, it's not compulsory purchase. That wouldn't be required here. And all 3 sites are on different tenancies, but we do have a means to be able to take possession for different use, if indeed that's the thing that's approved here.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Councillor Stevens, in answer to your second question about visits, I've visited all sites in the company of officers, and they will have visited those sites without me being present as well.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask, I'm not quite sure exactly what the capital grant from the Welsh Government actually covers. Does it cover all of the site contamination costs? Does it cover the air pollution survey costs? Does it cover the compensation to the landlord? I presume that it doesn't cover subsequent revenue costs in terms of maintenance costs of a council site, and also the costs possibly of an officer being employed as a gypsy and traveller liaison officer, in the same way that Torvine has got an officer concerned. And is there going to be a comparison between this and private sites? And also I'd like to know if the council has looked at the Welsh Government documents on this particular issue, and what's actually said there. There is a document called the Provision of Sites for Gypsy, Roma and Travellers, Welsh Parliament, Local and Housing Committee, August 2022, and there is actually a Welsh Government response to that particular issue, and there is a suggestion of more flexibility there in those reports with regard to private sites. And I think it would be helpful if at some stage we could look at having a discussion about the private sites. Chair, thank you.
Of course, Councillor Brown. Officers, Cabinet Member? We missed one question. Councillor Stevens asked if you visited the sites. Can you confirm that, Councillor Griffiths?
Yeah, I did confirm that. I have visited, officers have visited. Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kath Fallon, I'm the Head of Enterprise and Community Animation. Housing sits within my area. So thank you for the question, Councillor Brown. In terms of the capital grant, the site's capital grant, there's up to 100% of capital costs available to a maximum of 1.5 million per site project. So this could be used for creating hard standards, internal roadways, amenity blocks, that kind of thing. However, the grant cannot be used to fund feasibility studies, land acquisition costs or routine maintenance. In terms of the private call for sites, is that what you were referring to, Councillor Brown? I just want to check.
No, I mean, I was referring to the report and what it said about the, that's a Welsh Parliament report, and it does give details of the pros and cons of in that report of private sites and council sites, and it does also make recommendations, some of which the Welsh Government have accepted, and I don't think that there has been a consideration of that. It sounds to me as if the compensation to the landlord wouldn't be covered, and it sounds as if to me that the feasibility studies wouldn't be covered, the ongoing maintenance costs wouldn't be covered, and the revenue costs of officers wouldn't be covered either in a council site, because obviously you've just read a list of what they cover, but that report that I'm referring to does actually make further recommendations in relation to council and private sites, and you know, perhaps we could have a discussion on that particular aspect in a closed session. Thank you.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lucas.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you ever so much to the public for attending there today. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I just got off work for it. I'm intrigued, I think is the word I'd use initially. The Cabinet Member, Councillor Griffiths, said that it's half an acre amongst 5 acres, I believe he said, and it's 5 to 6 pitches. Well, my understanding of a pitch is one static caravan. Well, a static caravan can be 2 put together, and that's can be anything, I suppose, up to 24 foot to 30 foot. And then a travelling caravan, a touring caravan, I should say, and parking, and then a amenity block. Well, if you've got 5 or 6 pitches, how do you think you're going to get all that on half an acre? Because my half acre, you know, that's pushing your luck. It isn't going to be half an acre by anybody's imagination. So that's one question, please. I am very concerned about the cost of what we're doing here. We do need to be particularly careful, being conscious of what we're going through at the moment. We need to make sure that we are really thinking about how we're spending our money. The there's also we've had the conversation. I don't want to drag over what everybody else has said, but when we're talking about livelihoods from the current tenants and about compensation, but what happens about the rest of their lands and everything else? That's the ease of everything. And I'm sorry, but you've got to be really careful about how you think about how it's going to affect them. Maintenance costs, obviously, Councillor Brown's mentioned. Private sites, are we sure we haven't looked at this properly? Can we do that more? And my main question, I suppose, is what do the travellers themselves think? Because we can go through all this, and if they don't like where we're proposing, then why are we doing it? Do we actually know what they think, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Officers, Councillor Griffiths, would like to come in there.
On the actual reference that I made to potentially half an acre out of 5 acres on one of the sites, Welsh Government, we don't have to guess. Welsh Government has actually given a specific guideline on square metres for a pitch. It's 500 square metres for a pitch. So if you have 5 pitches, 2,500 square metres, which equates to around half an acre. So the calculation is done, and we don't have to estimate the size of a caravan in order to do that. In terms of the dialogue that we're having with travellers, as I've explained in other settings, our officers are in dialogue, regular dialogue with the actual families concerned. They will not be unaware of the sites which will be there for public consultation, and they will be very much part of that public consultation as individual families, and their representative body, travellers travelling ahead, again, will be very much part of that public consultation process. Again, they'll be aware of this, but we'll want to make sure that their views are properly reported, recorded in that public consultation exercise.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I believe it's me next, and I've got quite a few questions. Firstly, I'd just like someone to explain to me the green highlighted section in the map shown on Appendix 1, specifically for the 2 Port Stewart sites. I'm concerned about the process taken to shortlist these sites. We've heard this afternoon how ND was recommended to be in the final list, but has since been withdrawn due to the land being contaminated. How do we know our processes and proposals are fit and viable? There are discrepancies in Appendix 1, information which I'll provide later on, but there's also no guidance on costs, which members have touched on. With the council facing a very difficult financial challenge, how are we understanding the financial implications? There's also a disproportionate distribution of sites. Surely sites are acquired across the county, not just in one area. There's also some concern with regards to the implications to the RLDP proposals. I also like to understand the soil categories. I understand that the Caldicot East sites are classified as 1, 2 and 3A. Grade 1, excellent quality agricultural land. Grade 2, good quality agricultural land. Grade 3A, good to moderate quality agricultural land. Whilst I do not wish for these sites to be allocated on contaminated land at all, as we saw previously, surely this land is more suitable to be allocated for prime farming land. I feel that these sites are unsuitable. The road safety is of huge concern, like my residents have suggested today. They're both 50-mile-an-hour roads. The locations are difficult to access and egress, and none of these sites have access to a footpath for residents to access local amenities such as schools, shops, etc. We've heard from the public and members regarding Langley Close, but I do want to explain to you about Oak Grove Farm, which is historically land part of Severnview Farm and is now farmed by Park Wall Farm, and it's 2.4 miles from Oak Grove Farm. Both Bradbury Farm and Oak Grove Farm will be sandwiched between either the A48, the M48 and the B4245. The Welsh Parliament document specifically highlighted concerns how these sites are often in close proximity to A roads, pollution, and have no connection with the natural environment and air quality and poor air quality. We have an opportunity to identify sites that are fit for the requirement and could satisfy the gypsy and traveller community and the settled community. Why are we not trying to do this? Why are we going against the grain that Welsh Government have set out points and recommendations that we are simply ignoring? The access to public transport is extremely poor due to the lack of footpath, and the Crick Road site, there is a bottleneck at the north of that site. It is impossible for them to access easily with trailers, with caravans. I strongly dispute the report's easy access to the village. It's suggesting it falls within the active travel focus. The B4245 is far too dangerous to walk along the verge. There is no safe means of access to school and shops. The report is misleading as it is 1.6 miles away from the active travel routes, and yet we're expecting the community to walk this stretch of dangerous road without a footpath. The recommendation 19 in the Welsh Parliament document, the Children's Commissioner notes that local authorities must consider the wellbeing goals in relation to promoting health, equality and cohesive communities. However, traveller children and support workers have raised concerns with her office regarding the accessibility of sites and lack of access to services such as play facilities or safe walkways, or even schools or public transport, yet we're still ignoring this information that is given to us. Bradbury Farm is near a house which was refused planning for a driveway onto Crick Road because officers believed it was too dangerous, and now the council is proposing we allow pitches which will need to access and egress from this road. Again, there is no footpath there to local amenities. And lastly, I'm concerned about the lack of feedback on these sites. We've received little or no feedback from the Gypsy and Traveller community, but one family who kindly provided feedback originally in a report wished to remain in home community for school, employment and social reasons. We always try and place people who require housing as near to their connections as possible, but yet we are refusing to explore this for the Gypsy and Traveller community. I am interested if Travelling Ahead have visited, and I hope you reconsider this. So I'm interested to know officers in Councillor Griffiths' response. Thank you.
So thanks, Chair. And a number of questions. I'll have first go at a number of them and hand over then to my colleagues. The green highlighted areas in the maps you've been given are an illustration of the amount of the whole site that would be necessary for that half acre or so that I referred to. So it's important that people didn't go away with the idea that the whole site would be used. It's that small proportion of it. The reference you make to the contamination on the Andy site, that was known and referenced in the RAG ratings. It was known at the time of the original Cabinet consideration and Scrutiny Committee consideration. Given that level of knowledge at that time, it was different to any of the other sites, and it was a well-justified decision to remove it on those grounds. I'll leave costs to my colleagues, but that's been a lot of information has been shared on the costs and their funding already, but I'll leave that. The disproportionate distribution relates in significant part to the fact that the families we're working with are located in the south of the county and would wish, or the south or the middle of the county, and would wish to stay within those areas. In reference to the land quality, right back to 2019, the two sites, Bradbury Farm, Oak Grove Farm, have been identified and proposed for development during that period. by 2 successive administrations. So land quality issues were considered appropriate in those proposals and therefore would be for the specific proposal for gypsy and traveller sites. I take seriously the points that have been raised about access and road safety. Should we take these forward, they would need to be addressed. But I point out that provision of these pitches in Bradbury Farm and Oak Grove Farms would take place alongside the development of residential development up to those sites. And therefore it would be possible to factor into that residential development new forms of access to these pitches. I don't know, Mark, Kath, do you want to?
Just to supplement your last point, Councillor Griffiths and Chair, with the redevelopment of that wider site, there would be a primary school, there would be amenities as well as those access points. So that's the context in which we're considering it. In terms of feedback from the families, again, just to bring you back to the decision in hand that's been called in, which was to start consultation. So that's where we'll get the feedback. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Question really for the Cabinet members and a little bit of clarification. Can you clarify really that, or confirm that all of the gypsy traveller sites that we've identified so far, and we've discussed it at length today, and obviously I welcome the inputs from members of the public in that area, but will all of them not actually be fully considered until we get to the planning stage to fully assess the sites? And that, you know, it appears to me this afternoon we're jumping up and down. You know, are we putting the coach before the horses here before any final cabinet decision can be made to develop gypsy and traveller sites? Not all of those sites will pass planning. But I just want that clarification, please, that we're not going to really finally decide until we get to planning and they're fully assessed. Thanks.
I'll hand over to Mark at a moment. He's a qualified planner and I'm not. Inclusion in the replacement local development plan allows a planning application to be made in that location. Mm-hmm. The appraisal of that planning application, its design, its accessibility, its suitability on a variety of criteria would take place at that time. I don't want to give the impression that inclusion in the RLDP is somehow not a significant step. It is, but it's not the final step. The final consideration would take place with a lot more detail at the point of a planning application. But Mark.
I think that sums it up really succinctly. Thanks, Councillor Griffiths. I think the only thing I'd add is just, I've seen some comments in the chat still about the studies. So the approach that will be taken is, if this is agreed for consultation, alongside that consultation, those high-level studies will be done. So things like noise assessment, that could be a deal breaker. If the noise levels are so high that the site just cannot go ahead, even with some mitigation, then that will inform that decision. Those really detailed parts, as Councillor Griffiths just mentioned, would come at the planning application stage later. But we need to be satisfied the sites are suitable in principle to include in the deposit LDP, but that greater detail comes later. So those initial studies would form part of that assessment. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or points members would like to raise in the public, in front of the public and online? Because I think we need to close the meeting and move to a private session now. Are there any more questions? I can see a hand up, but I'm not sure whose it is. No?
Chairman, I got my hand up.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I'm in the chat. Yeah, I'm in the chat bar there.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question then. I'd just like to confirm then that we actually going to proceed with the contamination studies of the site and spend the £14,000 on the Langley Close there and on the other sites checking for contamination. Is that correct? Yes.
If we move to public consultation, there will, during that consultation period, be a high-level check on the contamination on that site.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. And just a couple of quick questions as well. I've written that much down here. I think the members of the public actually made it very clear there with all the problems that are there. And I'd just like a little bit of clarity reference to, I think it was a gentleman mentioned policy H6. Would it not be in the council's interest really to do checklists with each one of these sites, making sure that you've agreed. I'll take that as gospel that we've agreed we're going to do a contamination on the Langley Close, but there are the other sites there. Would it not be in our interest as a council to do a checklist, making sure that actually to proceed before we even spend any money, doing the checklist? I mean, I've noted here, policy H6, I was refused planning permission because of the open countryside when we apply for planning permission to do whatever. And then the footpaths which connect the site to the main thoroughfares, they're non-existent, there's none there. Home, safe routes to school, all these things are actually really important. You did mention there that actually, and I think it was Head of Planning mentioned there that actually we may be linking some of these up with a site development. But listen, I've been waiting for sites in this county for many, many years to come to fruition, as we all know. So until we have the site development, it means we should not be delivering this site or any site until we tick all the boxes. So if you put a site for 5 pictures, may have so many children there, we have a legal opportunity obligation to put safe routes to school. It's a legal obligation to do that. So children can walk to school. We don't bus them because we can't afford to bus them, that's proven. Because we're going to have a document very soon saying, actually, can we afford to bus our kids? But there's a legal obligation to a safe routes to school. It's very clear there's no lighting on that stretch of road. So that would all come with the development, we're saying, possibly. But if the development doesn't come for whatever reason, that means then this site isn't viable because we're not meeting a lot of the criteria that we're supposed to meet. Tell me whether I'm wrong or not. I'm only going off a site which was explored in my ward some time ago. I think we should listen to the public. They seem to be far, far cleverer than what we're putting into documents as reference to misleading statements. But I think we should have a checklist, Chair. And I think we need to check and tick. I got no issues with ticking and the tick's right. But we've got so much information here now, and trying to put that together before sites can actually go forward. I think that's so important, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth. Mark, did you want to come back in there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, in terms of those issues that we need to consider, that's the starting point that the RAG spreadsheet gives. We wouldn't suggest that we go through every single existing LDP policy because this whole exercise is about identifying sites for the new LDP, so that changes that policy framework. Policy H6, for your information members, is about extension to rural dwellings, so it wouldn't apply to this kind of development. And if we're looking at it in the context of the strategic site and the LDP, that area changes. You know, it isn't a bit of a field in the middle of nowhere. It's on the edge of a strategic site with those connectivities, with those connections rather, and with those amenities. In terms of Councillor Howard's point about, you know, what if this happens and that development doesn't, that is a good point, but this would be a development by the council, so that's within our gift to either pause on its delivery or to put those connections in place in advance to make sure the site does work. So that's, we have that certainty as an organisation, we can do that.
Chairman, just on that point then, sorry, Chair, on that point then, I think it's really important, the checklist, but with maybes as well, so we've got to put street lighting in for the 5 pitches, we've got to put footpath in for the 5 pitches, we've got to widen the road, we've got to put new accesses in, we've got to do this and that. I think, Chair, would really help on processing and taking things forward with sites as well. Even if more sites come forward, I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mark, can I just clarify something then? So sorry, you said the H6 means that it's on the outskirts of a, what was the wording you used? Sorry, I missed what you said because...
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We referred back by one of the speakers to policy H6 and his own planning application having been refused in the past. I think it may have been subsequently allowed at appeal. But the policy is in the current plan and relates to extensions to dwellings in the countryside, in a rural area. So that's the current policy framework. Okay. If this area has the strategic development site, it wouldn't be that kind of rural area, so that policy framework potentially changes. So we'd never assess a Gypsy Roma traveller site against the policy that looks at extending residential houses anyway. But just to make it clear, we don't want to go through the entire existing LDP because we are talking about that new policy framework and whether it's acceptable in that context.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break for members of the public to leave and obviously for Hazel to take down the live stream. Can I just thank members of the public for attending today? I've been a councillor for 6 years and I still have hot hands, red face. I still get nervous. It's really daunting coming and doing this. So I'd like to thank you all for attending. It takes great courage for you standing up for your communities. Thank you ever so much. And whilst I hope we don't have things that you feel the need to turn up and speak boldly, it's lovely to have engagement. It really is. So thank you. So you've got a 5-minute break, everyone. Refresh, and then we'll go into a closed session.
Presumably we stay in this and just turn cameras off.